What's going on, guys, and how are we doing tonight? Typically I don't post at this time of the day, but instead of another live reaction to the ban list, which we've all seen it already, we just did a brief 30-second live thing when it actually dropped saying what had happened. But anyway, we want to talk more about what this means going forward. So we have our October tier list. This is October 3rd right away tier list. We do have the new set coming, which will shake things up a little bit. We'll talk about that a little bit more down the road. We'll also work on our best cards to have for this format so that you can be best prepared to take down the best decks. You can already see on the screen we have tier 0.5, 1, 1.5, 2, and rogue. I got tearlaments up there already. I'm not going to waste any time getting into it. I'm not going to pretend like there could be a different deck up here. We all know which deck is up here. There's no point in messing around and saying, I wonder what deck is 0.5, right? Tearlaments is scary. The deck was the best deck, and not only the best deck, it was pulling away. Spright had a really big lead those first 2 weeks into the regionals, but Tearlaments was just pulling away further and further and further and further, especially since Tactical Masters release. It's the most represented deck among topping decks. It is the most winning deck. On top of that, the danger variant, they lost Snow. Snow is very good, Snow is very broken, but you cannot convince me that losing a one-of that they did not even see every game, because they have a little bit of RNG based mills. Yes, they mill a lot, so yes, they get to Snow a lot, but it is not guaranteed. They do not always get to Snow, and they can win without Snow plenty fine, especially when the deck that's doing far and above, just far above beyond second best deck, Spright Frogs. Yeah, you can throw that right out the window now. You still have Evil Twin, you still have Runic, you still have eldlich combo, you still have Schism with Guild Dog. There's so many ways. Cyber Spright had actually been doing decent at some OTS championships, I think, or case tournaments as well for Megatons. I saw 3 or 4 now that have topped. The Sprite's still around, but guys, Tearlaments it's the best deck of the format. It barely got touched. Again, you can't convince me that this deck got a big hit, because it really did not. It's the best deck. It didn't get hit as hard as the second best deck, so it will continue to be the best deck. And when it gets its new support, we may go into a tier 0 format. Will it happen? Not necessarily, but it might. So we'll kind of stick around to see what happens there. Moving on though, what other decks do we have? We have Despia. I'm going to put them in that tier 2 category. Once we get the Bystid archetype to come help boost them, we may see them climb up a little bit. But for right now, starting October 3rd, I think Despia is still a very strong tier 2 deck. Shout out Luke for mentioning it, but remember, Nadir's Servant is a free window for them without any other cards needed. I mean, any deck can do that as well, but they can do it without running bricks, without running cards that they're not already playing to begin with, and they can also do it after their combo and have no issues whatsoever there. Dragon Link, they actually got hit pretty good. Pepega Ruler gone. Helka Fibrex is a really good card to help them. I'm going to put them at Rogue until we can see them adapt. It's Dragon Link. They always adapt. But until they do, I'm going to put them in that Rogue strategy. I'm going to kind of shy away from up in here a little bit more than I typically would, mostly because if a deck's tier 0.5, if a deck is tier 0 or 0.5, that means tier 1, 1.5 isn't really existent, because everything else kind of gets pushed down to that Rogue strategy. That's why it's a tier 0 deck. If we still had 4 tier 1 decks, this wouldn't be 0.5. That's just how the game works. Drytron, 3 Benton back. I was debating moving them up, but again, it's the Tearlament syndrome. If Tearlament was just a very good tier 1 deck, I'd probably move Drytron to 1.5, but I do expect them, Tearlament, to just really take over the format, which means, based on tops and how the deck performs, Drytron's going to be a very good tier 2 deck. Eldlich, and especially Red Reboot's gone, which helps the Trap Eldlich deck. Branded Eldlich was seeing the most success recently. I'm going to leave them at tier 1.5, especially because early in a format, this is a very good deck to fall back onto, because when people are figuring out the format, figuring out the deck, what better way to do it than with Floodgates until you know what's going to happen. Exosisters, I'm going to put them as tier 2, again kind of bumping down a little bit just because where the format is headed. Floanderies, I'm going to leave them at 1.5 They were the 5th most represented deck since Tactical Masters released. They were 4th since Poe released. I still think that they're strong. They're still at full power. They're still going to be there. But again, it's just the conflict of having a 0.5 deck that's just making everything else lesser of a strategy. Guru Control, I really like Guru right now. So many floodgates. It can play things even like Necro Valley, which is very good against tearlaments. Like this deck, I think is going to be sneaky good coming into the format. Heroes, they got Fusion Destiny back to 3. Will we see DPE getting splashed around? Yeah, more than we had. Will it be all over like it used to be? No. You know, like it won't be. Before it was nice. You played 3 because if you opened it, great. But if you didn't, you had Verde. Now you play it because if you open it, great. But if you don't, well, it's kind of unfortunate because you don't have a way to cheat it out if you don't open it. Agnister, it's a deck I think to watch as a rogue strategy. I'm not really big on it, but we just want to kind of put it there and say, hey, this deck is still here. Don't forget about it. Invoked Dogmatica, they get Nadir back, they get Fusion Destiny back. Actually testing this deck before I made this video, and I was 5-0 currently. I really think the deck's good. It's got a lot of tools, a lot of starters, and a lot of consistency, which is just a recipe for success. Marine Cess, we're going to put them here in the rogue strategies. Not a whole lot to say. Like, by this point, you should know what Marine Cess does. I don't think it's enough to take down many events. Will someone maybe do it here or there? Probably not, but potentially. That's why they're here. Mathmech, we're going to leave at 1.5. They have a lot of space to run tools to counter the tearlament strategy, and then they have their combos to try and pop off, whether they want to go to OTK or just go like Trishula and being able to banish the tearlaments instead of being sending to the grave is very good. So I do think that they're a solid 1.5 deck. Probably one of the better decks to go against it. The deck everybody loves to hate. It's still here. We still have like 40 copies of Mystic Mine. It feels like Mystic Mine Burn. I'm going to leave it in the tier 2 strategy. Mystic Mine Burn. I don't think the deck is inherently bad on it, like broken or crazy. It's just annoying and it's not fun, and the card being played in these meta decks is really what did it for me personally. But I think it's Mystic Mine Burn is still a good tier 2 strategy. Punk, we're going to put them in the rogue. They get hit probably the hardest. They lost Pepega Ruler. They lost Helka Fibrex. That is huge. Will we see Punk variants still doing things? Yeah, maybe, probably, potentially. But for the most part, Punk got hit very hard. This engine is not as good, but again, there's still uses. There's still reasons to play it, right? Some decks. I mean, you know, Virtual World, you can put the XYZ guy on board for or Synchro, so you can put the, or no, both level 3s I think are tuners, right? You can put the XYZ though on board, and then you can do your Virtual World combos. So there's that. Speaking of Virtual World, I'm going to put them up at tier 2. I think this is another deck with sneaky potential. I think it'll be a solid deck to go against the format. Do I think it's going to see the representation or many people on it? No, I don't. But I think that it does have the toolbox, and maybe it's just a little more fragile than I would like, I guess, as far as decks go. But don't be too surprised, I guess, if you see Virtual World here or there. I think the deck is pretty solid. Rikka, we're going to put down in the rogue strategy. Runic, I am going to leave Runic up at tier 1 for now. And I mean, Runic Spright is the most represented variant, but they also have like the Mystic Mine mill out version. They have, you know, I don't even know what other variants there are of Runics. I know some play like tearlaments. Some play, you know, splash the Runic engine just into things. I'm going to leave Runic at tier 1 for right now, but like it's not a very confident tier 1. It's kind of just better than these decks, so it's going to go here, but there's a pretty sizable gap between tearlaments and Runic. Salamangreat, we're going to come in as another rogue strategy. Putting them there, you know, I don't think that's too much of a surprise. It's a deck that, again, it can be sneaky and pop off, but for the most part, I just don't expect it to do a whole lot. Spright, it's still the second best deck. it is still the second best deck. Like I said, they still have Window, they still have Italy, they still have Runic, which, I mean, we kind of categorize here. The deck's still there, the deck is still around. When it gets sprint, it has some other niche applications that you can do, and it's going to be adapted and played. But I think when you take the second best deck and you hit it pretty heavily, and you take the first best deck and don't do a whole lot, that just separates the gap there. Unless I'm crazy, maybe I'm missing something, but that's just kind of where I'm at with those. Sky Striker, they have so much room for toolbox, and now they can go Fusion Destiny again. I know that one extra copy is like 11% chance to open it, which is a pretty big deal. And if you're playing Prosperity, it's actually a pretty sizable chunk. I think Sky Striker 1.5, it's one of my favorite decks to go against into a tearlament tier 0 format, especially because like you can play DD Crow, you can play Shark Cannon at 3. Like, this deck has toolbox, this deck has what it needs to compete. And I do think Striker is a deck that's going to see more play, and especially if we head towards a tier 0 format for tearlaments, I think Sky Striker is going to be a pretty good anti-tier 0 deck. Swordsoul, we're going to put it as another tier 2 deck. It's kind of right in here, like with Drytron, with Despia, as far as the power levels, like these 3 decks, and we'll actually go 4. We'll throw Tri-Brigade in there too. These 4 decks I feel like are so close. Exosisters, can they hold on? They have a solid tearlament matchup, so we'll see how that goes for them, you know, moving forward. Mystic Mind's just kind of that deck that's there. Invoked and Virtual World both need to prove themselves a little bit better. And I do have one more deck I just want to mention. I thought about not actually saying anything about it just because where I crop my screen, it kind of would work out perfectly this way, but it's still here. And you know, we have Earth Machine. The deck, it seems to like pop up every format and get like a couple tops here or there. Is this the format it disappears? Most likely it can, you know, it's got a grind game, it's got toolbox room, it's got OTK potential, and it's got a following. It's a small following, but a following nonetheless. And there are players who just stick with this deck and continue to play it, and good on them. Do I think it's a great format for them? I really don't. Out of all these rogue decks, I mean, Ignister, Marine Cess, and Salamangrade all have room for like hand traps galore. Guru, I do really like Guru though, actually, this format. Other than that, like, I think it's gonna be a rough time for Rogue. Tier 2, I think they're all really good decks. They're just really not good enough. Obviously you can win, you can do good, you can have your day, you can win locals, you can win regionals. These decks have beaten these other better decks throughout the format and the last format, but I don't know. Like I said, I think we're headed towards a, you know, a little bit less diverse format, and I don't know how people are going to react to it, but it's going to be a little interesting. Let me know down below what you think about the tier list. What is too high? What's too low? What do you think about the ban list? Did they do enough? Did they do it right, or didn't they do, you know, are you content? Are you not? I guess let me know down below. Hit that subscribe button again. We're going to have our top, I don't know, 5 cards probably, or just top handful of cards to have for the October format so that you can compete as good as possible. And until next time, guys, take care.